Welcome to the USMCA Implementation Overview webinar. My name is Jasmine Moss. I support U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar recording in conjunction with representatives from CBP Office of Trade. This video will provide you with an overview of the new United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. Rollout of the regulatory, policy, coordination, and guidance changes required under USMCA are ongoing. This video reflects conditions as of June 2020. In addition to the overview provided in this video, there is a series of 4 printable detailed reference guides that can be used to learn more about the specific provisions of USMCA and the changes from the North American Free Trade Agreement. These reference guides can be accessed on the USMCA webpage on cbp.gov and will cover important topics such as entry procedures, rules of origin, certification, verification, record keeping, textiles, and automotive goods. We will provide further information on these reference guides and how to access them later in this video. The goal of both this video and the reference guides is to introduce the foundational requirements of the new USMCA agreement and equip the trade community for USMCA entry into force on July 1st, 2020. Throughout the course of this video, you will be hearing directly from those within CBP Office of Trade that are leading the implementation of USMCA. Let's get started.
Hello, my name is Adam Selesky, and I am a project lead at the USMCA Center within U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Office of Trade. We will discuss more about the USMCA Center and its role later in this video. Before we move on to overviewing the USMCA and its provisions, I would like to introduce you to some USMCA points of contact within CBP, who will be speaking through the course of this video and serve as resources to you throughout the USMCA's implementation. First off are individuals from the Textiles and Trade Agreements Division within U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Office of Trade. Textiles and Trade Agreements is responsible for coordinating with the appropriate stakeholders to determine the USMCA implementation guidelines for both CBP and the trade community. Textiles and Trade Agreements is led by Director Maya Kamar, who has been a key figure in ensuring that the trade industry is properly briefed and prepared for USMCA implementation. Margaret Gray serves as the branch chief for the Trade Agreements branch within Textiles and Trade Agreements. Anita Harris serves as the branch chief for Textile Policy within Textiles and Trade Agreements. And Jacqueline Sprungle serves as the branch chief for Enforcement within Textiles and Trade Agreements. Next, I would like to introduce the key points of contact within the USMCA Center. The USMCA Center serves as the central repository for USMCA implementation resources. Tamika Solomon serves as the acting director of the USMCA Center, and I, Adam Selesky, serve as the project lead for the USMCA Center. We will hear now from Director Maya Kamar, Textiles and Trade Agreements Division.
Thank you, Adam. My name is Maya Kamar. I am the director for the Textile and Trade Agreement Division here in the Office of Trade and CBP. And we're very excited to provide you with these great webinars that will cover the USMCA from different angles. And this is definitely one of the most elaborate products that we are producing. Some of the topics covered that you will see today, we will talk about the USMCA Center and its role, the different resources that you will have available to you. We'll introduce the USMCA and some of the changes from NAFTA to USMCA. We will also discuss entry procedures, rules of origin, certification requirements, verifications and determinations. We'll also talk about the textiles and good apparel and the automotive goods. It should be a very comprehensive webinar that you will hopefully enjoy. And now I leave you back with Adam Selesky.
We will now brief on U.S. Customs and Border Protection's USMCA Center. U.S. Customs and Border Protection has created a USMCA Center to coordinate CBP's implementation and enforcement of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, to ensure a smooth transition with consistent and comprehensive guidance to our internal and external stakeholders. The USMCA Center is housed within CBP's Office of Trade and includes subject matter experts from across CBP's offices, both at headquarters, our centers of excellence and expertise, and our ports of entry. The USMCA Center was launched in March 2020 and will operate for 3 to 5 years. The USMCA Center coordinates and tracks and promotes all U.S. Customs and Border Protection implementation efforts. The USMCA Center also supports the policy-focused USMCA efforts of CBP's Office of Trade, Textiles and Trade Agreements Division. The USMCA Center's core responsibilities will evolve over time from focusing on implementation, pre-entry into force, to training, regulations, and policy post-entry into force. In general, the Center's responsibilities are three-pronged. Coordination, that is ensuring smooth implementation of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement by leading our international, interagency, and interoffice coordination, including managing implementation working groups. Communication, leading the USMCA-related communication efforts for all stakeholders across various platforms, including informational briefings, fact sheets, in coordination with other CBP offices. Regulations and policy. The Center will support and monitor the development of all USMCA-related legal and regulatory documents, including uniform, interim, and domestic regulations, and other memorializations of work, including Memorandum of Understanding. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Mary Alice Nowak from the USMCA Center, to walk through some U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement resources.
The USMCA Center serves as a central repository for a wide variety of USMCA resources that are available to the trade. And we at the USMCA Center are working to provide the trade community with informational resources, briefings, and outreach on USMCA implementation. And these resources are available on the USMCA webpage at cbp.gov. To access this page, you can go to the link you see listed on your screen, or simply go to cbp.gov and search on USMCA. In general, USMCA resources can be divided into 3 categories. First, there are informational briefings, such as this webinar, that provide overviews of different aspects of USMCA, its provisions and requirements. Second, there are written and multimedia materials available, which includes such things as compliance guidance, fact sheets, side-by-side comparisons of NAFTA and USMCA, and frequently asked questions. And finally, additional U.S. government resources. These include links to the text of the agreement and the Implementation Act, a link to a USMCA report issued by the U.S. International Trade Commission, points of contact for various U.S. government agencies, and other resources. Next, here's a little more information on the various written and multimedia materials that are available on USMCA. First, the USMCA webpage features links to USMCA foundational documents, namely the text of the agreement and the Implementation Act. And this page will be updated to feature links to USMCA-related regulations, such as the domestic regulations. Next, as far as the USMCA regulations, the uniform regulations were recently published by the United States Trade Representative. And there's a link to these regulations on the USMCA webpage. And the domestic regulations, once they are published, will be incorporated into the Code of Federal Regulations as 19 CFR Part 182. And a link to the domestic regulations will also be provided on the USMCA webpage. And finally, USMCA will be incorporated into the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States as General Note 11. This note is also currently pending, and a link to General Note 11 will be added to the USMCA webpage when it is available. Next, CBP's Office of Trade released USMCA Interim Implementing Instructions on April 20th of this year to support USMCA implementation preparations for trade stakeholders. This document contains a lot of helpful information on such topics as how to make a claim under USMCA, the rules of origin, record-keeping requirements, and so forth. And these interim instructions will be updated to reflect the contents of the uniform regulations, as well as the pending general note. And the final implementing instructions will be available no later than July 1st of 2020. Next, in addition to all of these materials, CBP's Office of Public Affairs will be publishing press releases and arranging for press engagement on USMCA's implementation. Additionally, the USMCA Center is creating a number of videos on compliance with USMCA and how to find USMCA resources and other guidance. And these videos will be posted to cbp.gov and distributed widely to our trade stakeholders. CBP's Office of Trade is also developing fact sheets that highlight key issues in USMCA and provide side-by-side comparisons of USMCA and NAFTA. The USMCA Center is also maintaining a list of frequently asked questions on the USMCA webpage to answer questions received from the trade. This is a good list to review because we often receive similar questions from multiple inquirers. And this page will be updated periodically with new questions added, so please keep checking back here. And now moving on to additional government resources. First, CBP issues binding advanced rulings and other legal decisions in connection with the importation of merchandise into the United States, including the eligibility of goods under free trade agreements, such as USMCA. Advanced rulings provide the trade community with a transparent and efficient means of understanding how CBP will treat a prospective import or carrier transaction. And more information on the binding rulings program can be found at cbp.gov/trade/rulings. Also, the Cargo Systems Messaging Service, or CSMS, is one of CBP's methods for communicating with our trade partners regarding news and updates on CBP's Automated Commercial Environment, or ACE. Next, CBP's monthly Trade News Snapshot provides an overview of the latest updates on trade enforcement and facilitation activities. And Trade Snapshot articles also highlight many of CBP's important trade programs, initiatives, and operations for our trade partners and the public. Also, the CBP Information Center is another resource the trade can use to get answers to questions, including questions on USMCA. The Information Center can be reached either through the Ask CBP search engine or the CBP call center. And finally, CBP's Office of Trade is active on various social media platforms, including the ones you see listed here. And we invite you to check these platforms as well for USMCA-related updates. And here's a list of additional government resources where you can find USMCA-related information. These include the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States, which will include General Note 11 once it is published, on the U.S. Trade Representative's website. There are also some Federal Register notices that deal with USMCA-related topics that you can find at federalregister.gov. For example, on April 21st of this year, the USTR published a Federal Register notice on the alternative staging regimes for automotive goods. And the U.S. Department of Labor will be issuing a Federal Register notice for USMCA's new labor value content requirement on automotive goods, and that will be published by June 30th of this year. And for export-related USMCA questions, you can check with the U.S. Department of Commerce at www.trade.gov/export-solutions. And finally, the USMCA Center can be contacted via the USMCA mailbox at usmca@cbp.dhs.gov. And while you are free to send in your questions to our inbox, we do encourage you to please check the USMCA webpage first, since your question may have already been addressed within our list of frequently asked questions, or elsewhere on our page. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Brandon Morris.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Hello, everyone. I would like to thank you for tuning in to this USMCA implementation webinar. My name is Brandon Morris, and I am a supervisory entry specialist based out of the Port of Detroit within the Automotive and Aerospace Center of Excellence and Expertise Enforcement Branch. And I am currently serving a TDY to the USMCA Center within CBP's Office of Trade. I will be presenting a brief overview of USMCA's predecessor, the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, as well as an overview of the USMCA agreement itself. The North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, is an international agreement signed by the governments of Canada, Mexico, and the United States, creating a trilateral trade bloc in North America. NAFTA entered into force on January 1st, 1994, and superseded the 1988 Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement, or CAFTA. NAFTA had the goal of eliminating all tariff and non-tariff barriers of trade and investment between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, and featured chapters that introduced novel considerations for North American trade and included the provisions you see on the screen. Only provisions within customs scope, such as rules of origin and customs procedures, will be addressed in this briefing. Provisions under customs scope for NAFTA are bolded in the list on this slide. Those provisions out of scope are handled by other U.S. government agencies. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, is a trade agreement between the named partner countries and will replace NAFTA. Referred to in Canada as CUSMA and TMEX in Mexico, the USMCA both preserves the 25-year-old NAFTA's trilateral trade pact and modernizes the agreement to the 21st century to reflect developments in technology and trade practices and add new criteria to certain commodities, including automotive goods. The USMCA will not change NAFTA's tariff structure or the zero tariffs policy on most manufacturing and agricultural goods. The USMCA will enter into force on July 1st, 2020. While many provisions modernize those existing within NAFTA, the new USMCA agreement does feature new and novel provisions related to automotive goods. These include increased regional value content, or RVC, requirements from 62.5% to 75%. A new labor value content, or LVC, requirement where importers must certify that a certain percentage of the automobile's content by value is sourced from manufacturing facilities in the United States, Mexico, and Canada that pay at least $16 US. New steel and aluminum requirements that require importers to certify that at least 70% of the vehicle producers' overall annual purchases of steel and aluminum by value are sourced from North America. CBP is working closely with our U.S. government partners, Canada, Mexico, and the trade community to ensure a comprehensive and smooth implementation from NAFTA to USMCA. This slide details specific provisions of the new USMCA agreement. Some items to highlight include USMCA includes a 16-year sunset clause, and all three parties are required to reevaluate the agreement every 6 years. Originating goods and tariff preference level, or TPLs, goods are exempt from merchandising processing fees if the claim is made at time of entry. Related to that, USMCA allows post-importation preference claims to request a refund of excess duties within 1 year of importation in accordance with 19 USC 520D. However, MPF paid on entries are not refunded. Primary responsibility for compliance has shifted to the importer under USMCA from a more exporter-focused under NAFTA. In terms of USMCA citations, while not yet published, the applicable general note will be General Note 11. USMCA will be reflected in 19 USC 182 or 19 CFR 182. Tariff items eligible for preferential tariff treatment under USMCA will leverage a new special program indicator, SPI of S as in Sam, that will be reflected in the new special column of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States, or HTSUS. We will be sure to update the trade community with any and all information once available. That concludes my overview of the USMCA. We will now move forward with some high-level presentations on specific USMCA provisions and requirements. With that, I will turn it over to Chief Gray to discuss entry procedures.
My name is Maggie Gray, and I'm the branch chief for the Trade Agreements branch within CBP Textile and Trade Agreements Division. This topic kicks off the more technical discussion of the USMCA, and while this presentation is very high level, additional information can be found in the accompanying entry procedures presentation. So a new special program indicator has been assigned to USMCA, and it is this SPIS as in Sam. Any entry claiming USMCA preference will need to use this SPIS. The HTS-US will be updated effective July 1 with this SPIS indicator. So all eligible USMCA tariff lines will have the designated S indicator in the special subcolumn of the HTS-US associated with that entry. A few statistics on the HTS-US. There are approximately 11,081 8-digit subheadings in the current version edition of the HTS-US. 6,800 of these subheadings are NAFTA eligible items, and most are free. These NAFTA eligible items will transfer to USMCA on USMCA's entry into force on July 1 and will be eligible for claims on July 1, 2020. By making the preference claim, the importer is declaring that the good qualifies for the preference benefit and meets all the requisite requirements for the benefits. SPIS Plus indicator is also available for agriculture goods, and more guidance will be provided on that. So what are the USMCA entry procedures? As indicated in this chart, NAFTA rules and requirements will apply for entries filed between now through to June 30th. Beginning July 1st, however, USMCA rules and requirements will apply. Residual NAFTA requirements, of course, associated with entries filed before July 1st, 2020, related to changes and other special handlings related to drawback and recon entries, those types of filings will continue after July 1st, 2020. Note that the entry type 08 NAFTA duty deferral will continue to exist, as is the entry type 08 USMCA duty deferral. Additional entry considerations. First, we'll start with merchandise processing fee. As with NAFTA, the merchandise processing fees are exempt. So on entry, the importer will receive exemption of the merchandise processing fee. For post-entry or post-importation claims, however, a legislative remediation is necessary to allow the MPF to be refunded. So the MPF is not exempt for post-importation claims. Next, we'll talk about country of origin markings. The country of origin markings are same as NAFTA. The marking requirements are governed by 19 CFR 102 marking rules, and the 19 CFR 102 marking rules will apply for USMCA. However, unlike NAFTA, goods do not first have to be marked as belonging to a country of Canada or Mexico before determining preference. So those rules have been relaxed. Domestic goods are also eligible for preferential treatment. So a good can be marked as country of Mexico, Canada, or US. And those will be accepted as countries of origin on the USMCA. Next, post-importation claims. Post-importation claims that are made after entry will receive the duties paid. Those will be refunded and can be refunded within 1 year of importation in accordance with 19 CFR 19 USC 1520D. Post-importation claim determinations and corrections are addressed in the supplemental presentation. And similar to NAFTA, it operates very in the same fashion. As mentioned previously, the MPF fee is not refundable on the post-importation claims. Next, we'll talk about rules of origin. An originating good is one that meets the rules of origin set forth in General Notes 11 and all other requirements of the agreement. The HTS-US will be amended to include the General Notes 11, which includes both the general and specific rules of origin definitions and other related provisions. NAFTA has 6 criteria, A through F, and USMCA has 4 criterion, A through D, for the general rules of origin. Criterion A begins with goods that are wholly obtained or produced entirely in the territory of one or more parties to the agreement. These are primary goods, including goods that are grown, fished, or mined in the parties to the agreement. Criterion B covers goods that are produced entirely in the territory of one or more parties using non-originating materials, provided those goods satisfy the product-specific rules of origin. 95% of manufactured goods use criterion B. Criterion C, those are goods that are produced entirely in the territory of one or more parties exclusively from originating material. And these are usually self-produced goods that qualify under criterion C. Criterion D are goods that are produced entirely in the territory of one or more parties that meets an RVC threshold and is classified with its material or classified as unassembled or disassembled unfinished goods per GRI 2A that has the essential character of the finished good and thus is classified upon importation as a finished good. Exceptions to using criterion D are goods from the textile chapter 61 through 63. So in general, a good is originating when the criterion A through D applies and the goods satisfy all other applicable origin requirements. Next, we'll talk about regional value content calculations. A good originates in a party when the materials from and the processing in the parties account for at least a certain percentage of the value of the good. The product-specific rule will specify the regional value content, and the vast majority of the product-specific rules require a tariff shift together with the regional value content method. As indicated here, there are 2 methods, and same as NAFTA, these methods are the transaction value method and the regional value method. The transaction value method is more common. It involves the FOB value of the good, the price that is actually paid or paid for the good, and the net cost method is used when a transaction value is not available. It's also used mostly for intermediate materials and in auto commodities. Both methods are standard methods and use the standard thresholds that are under NAFTA. For transaction value, it's up to 60%. of the transaction value of the good, and net cost is 50% threshold. Additional rules of origin consideration, starting with the de minimis. So goods can originate under these criteria, assuming that the de minimis threshold is upheld. The de minimis allows for not more than 10% of the value of the non-originating material to be used in the production of the good. Next, we'll talk about sets, treatments of sets classified as a result of the application of General Rules of Interpretation 3 can qualify if not more than 10% of the non-originating value of the good in the set meets that 10% threshold. Next, we'll talk about transit and transshipment. This covers where goods that transit through a third country, if that in transit in the third country, it does not leave customs control, it will retain its status of origin. Otherwise, if it enters into customs to the commerce of that country, the third country, it would lose status. There is simple processing that's allowed while in that third country, and it preserves the condition, to preserve the condition of the good, and the good will originate if it remains under customs control while in that third country. Next, we'll talk about certification requirements and procedures. Please note, for additional detail, please refer to the corresponding certification procedures and requirements presentation. So similar to NAFTA, a USMCA claim must be based on a certification of origin for the purposes of certifying that the good qualifies as an originating good. This certification can be completed by the importer, exporter, or producer of the good. The importer is responsible for exercising reasonable care and accuracy in completing the certification of origin. However, USMCA requirements differ in NAFTA in the sense that under NAFTA, a certificate of origin, the Form 434 was used. In USMCA, there is no certificate. In fact, NAFTA certificate of origin will not be accepted as a valid form of USMCA certification of origin, but an importer can take the data elements from the NAFTA certificate and submit them in an affidavit or in a different format for purposes of USMCA, providing that those goods meet the USMCA requirements. Additional information related to minimum data elements requirements for informal entries and corrections can be found in the supplemental presentation. Next, we'll talk about record keeping. USMCA record keeping requirements are the same as NAFTA. An importer claiming preferential treatment must maintain records and documentation related to the following areas for a period of no less than 5 years from the date of entry. So records and supporting documents related to the importation, such as a certificate of origin or entry documentation, all records and supporting documents related to the origin of the good, including NEC certification or other types of documents related to the good, records and supporting documentation necessary to demonstrate compliance with the transit and transshipment provision in Article 4.8 of the agreement. All these records must be rendered for examination and inspection to CBP upon request. Record-keeping documents can be maintained. These are differences to NAFTA, where the record-keeping documents can be maintained in any format, including electronic format, provided that the records or documentation can be readily available upon request. Next, the requirements with respect to waivers for informal entries even while that might be allowed for the entry certification not to be provided for informal entries or in other cases, the documentation supporting the claim has to be maintained by the importer for not less than 5 years. Specific to auto, there are certain certifications that are new to USMCA, including the labor value content certification, steel and aluminum certifications. These are new documents, and those will need to be maintained as with is the other record-keeping requirements related to that claim. This concludes my section, and I will now turn over to Chief Sprungle to discuss verifications and determinations. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Sprungle, and I serve as the Branch Chief for Enforcement within CBP's Office of Trade, Textile and Trade Agreements Division. Nearly all of today's presentation comes from USMCA Chapter 5, Origin Procedures. Although we will talk briefly about verification site visits, today's presentation and the supplemental materials will focus mainly on the processes related to written verifications. CBP may conduct a verification to determine whether a good qualifies as originating by one or more of the following: a written request or questionnaire, such as a CBP Form 28, Request for Information, seeking information, including documents, from the importer, exporter, or producer of the good; a verification visit to the premises of an exporter or producer of a good in order to request information, including documents, and observe the production process and related facilities. This type of verification may be conducted on any type of merchandise and has some of the same required procedures that we saw in NAFTA. For textiles, on-site verification visits to exporters or producers may also be conducted according to the procedures set out in Article 6.6, which is found in USMCA Chapter 6. In USMCA, textiles and apparel goods has its own chapter. That was not the case in NAFTA. And lastly, a verification may be conducted by any other procedure as may be decided by the parties. Okay, let's move on to take a closer look at CBP's written verification process and how it differs from NAFTA. Under NAFTA, CBP would request the Certificate of Origin, CBP Form 434, from the importer via a CBP Form 28, Request for Information. Then CBP would send a second CBP Form 28 to the exporter, requesting supporting documents, because they were the entity required to complete the Certificate of Origin, the Form 434. Under USMCA, CBP can initiate the verification with the importer and ask for both the certification of origin and the supporting documents in one CBP Form 28. As the slide shows, CBP will issue a CBP Form 29 Notice of Action Taken when the goods are determined to be compliant or have a positive finding. The notice will go to the importer and to the exporter or producer if one of those entities were the certifier. The process of issuing a CBP Form 29 Notice of Action Proposed before issuing a CBP Form 29 Notice of Action Taken stays the same, except for USMCA, in the case of a negative determination, CBP will issue a CBP Form 29 Proposed to the importer. And if the importer is not the certifier, CBP will also send the proposed notice to the exporter or producer as appropriate. More detailed information on CBP procedures for verifications can be found in the supplemental verification and determinations presentation. So let's review again the flow of documents specific to a written verification under USMCA. In response to a CBP Form 28 Request for Information, If the importer provides sufficient information to demonstrate the goods originate, CBP will send a CBP Form 29 Notice of Action Taken that indicates a positive determination. CBP will also notify the exporter or producer if they were the certifier. If the importer does not adequately substantiate the claim, CBP will notify the importer, the certifier, and any producer or exporter subject to verification that provided the information through a CBP Form 29 action proposed. Recipients will have 30 days to submit additional information to substantiate the claim. If no additional information is received or information is received, but it's still insufficient, CBP will issue a negative determination by sending a CBP Form 29 action taken to the importer and again to the exporter or producer if they were the certifier. If additional information is received and it demonstrates that the goods meet the rule of origin, CBP will issue a positive determination and send a CBP Form 29 action taken to the importer, exporter, or producer if they were the certifier. Additional USMCA provisions related to verifications and determinations that are addressed in more detail in the accompanying reference material include blanket certifications. If a preference claim is made on a good covered by a blanket certification and a negative determination is issued, CBP will deny preference to all importations of identical goods covered by that blanket certification, and it'll liquidate the entries with the applicable duties and merchandise processing fees. Pattern of conduct. If CBP finds that an importer continues to claim preference on a good previously subject to a negative determination, CBP may deny preference on all identical goods imported by that importer until compliance with the rules of origin is established. And lastly, a protest and appeal provision. Importers may contest CBP's denial of preferential tariff treatment under USMCA by filing a protest within 180 days of liquidation. I will now turn it over to International Trade Analyst Imani Majet to discuss textiles.
Thank you, Chief Sprungel. Hello, my name is Imani Majet, and I serve as an International Trade Analyst within the Textile Policy Branch at CBP's Office of Trade, Textile and Trade Agreements Division. I will be discussing the new textile requirements under USMCA. Further information can be found in the textile section of the supplemental presentation. Overall, USMCA features the following changes from NAFTA. USMCA now allows fabrics used for visible lining in certain apparel of Chapters 61 and 62 to be sourced from outside the USMCA parties. It increases de minimis allowance for non-originating inputs from 7 to 10% and includes a caveat for elastomeric yarn. It adds a provision for the treatment of sets for textiles, and it will now require that secondary components or sewing thread, pocketing fabric, narrow elastic fabric, and coated fabric used in the production of apparel to be sourced within one or more of the parties to the agreement in order for those apparel products to be used and treated as originating. Under NAFTA, these items were sourced from outside the region. It allows rayon fiber and rayon filament other than lyocell and acetate to be of any origin when used in a good classified in Chapter 50 through 63 or heading 9619. It reduces some trade preference levels or TPLs for U.S. imports from Canada and Mexico while subsequently increasing TPLs for U.S. exports to Canada or apparel and other finished textile goods. And finally, it establishes a textile chapter for North American trade, including textile-specific verification and customs cooperation provisions that provide new tools for strengthening customs enforcement and preventing fraud. Eligibility, or rules of origin. Textile and apparel products may qualify as originating under USMCA if they meet the requirements specified in the agreement. In general, USMCA textile and apparel rules of origin follow the yarn forward concept, with some exceptions, which requires that the formation of yarn, weaving, or knitting of fabric, and cutting and sewing of a garment occurs in one or more of the parties. However, non-apparel goods may follow a fiber-forward rule of origin. The following are the rules of origin and processes for basic textile products. Woven fabric follows the yarn forward rule of origin, which allows the fiber to be of any origin, but requires that the yarn is spun or extruded, finished, and fabric woven in one or more parties to qualify for preferential treatment. Yarn follows the fiber forward rule of origin, which states that the fiber must originate in one of the USMCA parties, and the yarn must be spun or extruded and finished in one or more of the parties to qualify for USMCA preferential treatment. Knit fabric follows the fiber forward rule of origin, which states that the fiber must originate in one of the parties, the United States, Mexico, or Canada, and the yarn must be spun or extruded, finished, and the fiber knitted in one or more of the parties to qualify for preferential tariff treatment. There are 4 exceptions to the yarn forward and fiber forward rule of origin concepts that govern textile and apparel goods that allow for foreign input. The cut and sew or single transformation provision allows foreign-made fabric and or yarn to be used to produce an apparel or textile article. The cutting of the fabric or knitting to shape and sewing and or assembly of all of the components must occur in one or more of the USMCA countries. The U.S.-Mexico assembly provision allows preferential treatment for textile and apparel goods that are assembled in Mexico from fabrics that are wholly formed and cut in the United States. The wholly formed and cut fabrics are exported to Mexico, where they are assembled into the final textile or apparel good and then imported into the U.S. using a designated provisional HTS number in conjunction with the HTS or Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the finished textile goods. The short supply provision or commercial availability allows use of certain foreign fibers, yarns, and fabrics that have been determined by the Department of Commerce not to be available in commercial quantities in a timely manner to be used to produce qualifying textile and apparel products. Short supply only applies to goods of Chapter 62. Tariff preference levels, or TPLs, allow preferential treatment for specified quantities of certain yarns, fabrics, apparel, and made-up textile goods that do not meet the USMCA rules of origin, but which have undergone significant processing in one or more USMCA countries. Under USMCA, TPLs are exempt from merchandise processing fees. Additional USMCA provisions related to textile and apparel goods include an increase in de minimis threshold, which allows up to 10% of the weight of non-originating foreign fibers and yarn to be used to make up a textile or apparel good and still qualify for preferential tariff treatment. Within the 10% de minimis limit, the total weight of elastomeric content may not exceed 7% of the weight. The treatment of sets for textiles is new for USMCA. Textile or apparel goods that are put up for retail sale as a set and classified in accordance with Rule 3 of the General Rules of Interpretation of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule will be considered originating if each of the goods in the set is an originating good or the total value of the non-originating good in the set does not exceed 10% of the value of the set. Additional provisions, also referred to as chapter rules or notes, relate to the following components and apply to the component that determines the tariff classification. For visible linings, fabric used for visible linings may now be sourced from outside of the parties to the agreement. Narrow elastic fabric, upon entry into force of the agreement, narrow elastic fabric used in apparel products of chapters 61 and 62 may be sourced from anywhere. However, effective 18 months after the date of entry into force of the agreement, apparel containing narrow elastic fabric of subheading 5806.20 or heading 6002 will be considered originating only if such fabrics are both formed and finished from yarn in the territory of one or more of the parties. The apparel article must also satisfy the tariff shift requirement that applies to the good. For sewing thread, upon entry into force of the agreement, sewing thread of specific headings used in apparel products of Chapter 61 and 62 may be sourced from anywhere. However, effective 12 months after the date of entry into force of the agreement, apparel containing sewing threads from certain headings shall be considered originating only if such sewing thread is both formed and finished in the territory of one or more of the parties. For pocket bag fabric, upon entry into force of the agreement, the pocket bag fabric may be sourced from anywhere. However, effective 18 months after the date of entry into force of the agreement, apparel containing a pocket or pockets with pocket bag fabric must be both formed and finished in one or more of the parties. The component must also satisfy the tariff change requirement that applies to the goods. Also, for woven apparel made of blue denim fabric of specific subheadings, the pocket bag fabric rule goes into effect 30 months from the date of entry into force of the agreement. For coated fabric, upon entry into force of the agreement, coated or laminated fabrics of HTS heading 5903 that are used in the assembly of a good of Chapter 63 may be sourced from anywhere. However, effective 18 months after the date of entry into force of the agreement, the coated or laminated fabrics that are used in the assembly of a textile good that is classified in Chapter 63 will be considered to be only originating if those coated and laminated fabrics are used and formed and finished in one or more of the parties to the agreement. This provision does not apply to some specific goods for Chapter 63. And finally, rayon fiber and rayon filament of specific headings of Chapters 54 and 55, other than lyocell and acetate, may be of any origin when used in a good classified in Chapters 50 through 63 or heading 9619, provided that the good otherwise meets the applicable product-specific rule. I will now turn it back over to Adam Selesky to discuss automotive goods.
Hello. I will now provide a high-level overview of the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement requirements related to automotive goods. In addition to the more detailed reference deck, the automotive appendix and tables from the USMCA are also included for ease of reference. These slides overview what has changed from the North American Free Trade Agreement. Under the North American Free Trade Agreement, in general, regional value content for automotive goods had a threshold of 62.5%. Automotive goods also featured a tracing list and the concept of deemed originating. Automotive goods under NAFTA had no steel and aluminum procurement requirements and no labor value content requirement. Under the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, there is significant change for automotive goods. First, regional value content has been increased to a threshold of 75%. The tracing list and the deemed originating concept have been removed in the new USMCA. The USMCA also includes new steel and aluminum annual procurement requirements of 70% from North American sources, and a new labor value content requirement that will require coordination by the U.S. Department of Labor. In addition, the USMCA provides alternative staging specifically for automotive goods, a process that will be managed by the U.S. Trade Representative. All of these concepts will be discussed in detail during this presentation. It's important to note that the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement's auto rules of origin are new and novel. Many of these concepts have never been included before in a trade agreement, and we will be breaking new ground in the implementation of these auto rules of origin. To illustrate these new requirements and how they interrelate with one another, we have this infographic. In sum, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement introduces 4 new provisions related to automotive goods. The regional value content, 1, which will be 75%. The steel content, 2, of which the importer must demonstrate 70% of their annual procurement is sourced from North American sources. The aluminum content, 3, where the importer must demonstrate that 70% of their procurement is from North American sources. And 4, labor value content, where the importer must certify that a certain percentage by value of their automotive import is sourced from manufacturing facilities that pay $16 an hour USD or more. In addition, this labor value content must come at least 25% for passenger vehicles, 30% for light trucks from high wage materials and manufacturing costs, and caps of no more than 10% high wage technology and no more than 5% high wage assembly. I will talk about this in detail later in this presentation. Please note that the country of origin requirements have not changed from the North American Free Trade Agreement. I will now turn my presentation over to Mary Alice Nowak to discuss a few of these new requirements.
Thank you, Adam. The first of the new requirements for automotive products that I'll be discussing have to do with changes to regional value content. First, as Adam mentioned, the required regional value content, or RVC, percentages under USMCA will, in general, be higher than what they were under NAFTA. And these increased percentages will be staged or phased in over a period of either 3 years or 7 years, depending on the type of vehicle. Also, the RVC for complete vehicles must be calculated using the net cost method, but the RVC for certain specified parts may be calculated using either the net cost method or the transaction value method. And specifically, as far as different types of vehicles, for passenger vehicles and light trucks, the increased RVC requirements will be phased in over 3 years. And all of these specific requirements, including the staging percentages by year, can be found in Article 3 of the Automotive Appendix, which is the appendix to Annex 4B. And for heavy trucks, the increased percentages will be phased in over a period of 7 years. And the specific requirements for these vehicles, including the annual staging schedule, are set out in Article 4 of the Automotive Appendix. And when these staged increases are fully implemented, the required RVC percentages will be 75% for passenger vehicles and light trucks and 70% for heavy trucks. And the percentages for parts of these vehicles will be in that same general range. And finally, Article 10 of the Automotive Appendix also identifies specific vehicles and vehicle parts that are subject to an immediate RVC requirement of 62.5% under the net cost method. The Automotive Appendix sets out all of this information, and we've listed the specific articles of that appendix here, along with what they cover. Article 3 covers passenger vehicles and light trucks and parts of these vehicles. Article 4 covers heavy trucks and parts. And Article 10 covers other specifically identified vehicles and their parts. Now, in addition to meeting the product-specific rules of origin and other requirements, there is a new steel and aluminum requirement for autos. Specifically, passenger vehicles, light trucks, and heavy trucks are originating if at least 70% of the producer's purchases of steel and aluminum are originating. This means that USMCA requires that 70% by value of a vehicle producer's corporate purchases of steel and aluminum must originate within the United States, Canada, or Mexico. USMCA lists the products that will count toward this requirement in Table A.1 of the Automotive Appendix to the agreement. And just to be very clear about this, these purchases of steel and aluminum do not need to contribute directly to vehicle production or even relate to imported merchandise. This is a requirement on the vehicle producer itself. And with that, I will now turn it back over to Adam, who will discuss the new requirement of labor value content.
Labor value content is a new and novel criteria for automotive goods introduced in the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Under the new USMCA labor value content provisions, automotive goods will only receive preferential tariff treatment if the importer certifies that a certain percentage of the automobile's content by value is sourced from manufacturing facilities paying at least $16 an hour USD. Automotive goods will be originating only if the vehicle certifies that its production meets the following labor value content, or LVC requirements. For passenger vehicles, 30% of the value upon entry into force must come from these high-wage manufacturing facilities. This percentage will increase to 40% by 2023. More specifically, these labor value content percentages must consist of at least 15% of high-wage material and manufacturing expenditures upon entry into force, which will increase to 25% by 2023. There are also caps. No more than 10% of high-wage manufacturing can be derived from high-wage technology expenditures, such as computer elements of the automobile. And in addition, there is a cap of no more than 5% for high-wage assembly expenditures. This includes, for example, on-site engineers and other high-paid individuals who may increase the average wage rate upon entry into force. For light trucks, the LVC requirement is 45% upon entry into force. There is no gradual increase for light trucks. As with passenger vehicles, there is a certain percentage of high-wage material manufacturing expenditures. For light trucks, 30%. The caps of 10% on high-wage technology and 5% for high-wage assembly are also present for light trucks. Further information on labor value content calculation formulas, averaging protocols, and certification requirements may be found in the supplemental presentation. Below is an example of a past certification or positive determination for an automotive import. In this instance, an imported vehicle into the United States would receive preferential treatment as it has passed the labor value content criteria. More specifically, this vehicle has a high-wage manufacturing, that is the sum total of the annual value of parts and materials procured from facilities with a production rate greater than $16 an hour, divided by the net cost of the vehicle. For a passenger vehicle, greater than 25%, or for a light truck, greater than 30%. High-wage technology can be used up to 10%, and the high-wage assembly can be sourced from up to 5%. Adding these percentages up, the vehicle is greater than 40% if a passenger vehicle, and greater than 45% if a light truck, and thus would meet the labor value content criteria, and CBP would allow preferential treatment under the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. In this second instance, we have an example of an automotive import that would fail labor value content criteria and thus not receive preferential treatment. As you can see with the vehicle B, the high wage manufacturing, that is the sum total of annual value of parts and materials procured from a facility with a production wage rate of $16 an hour, is less than 25% for a passenger vehicle, or less than 30% for a light truck. Even with the high wage technology cap of 10% and the high wage assembly cap of 5%, the vehicle does not achieve the minimum 40% for a passenger vehicle, minimum 45% for a light truck, and thus does not meet labor value content and thus cannot receive preferential treatment under the USMCA. Please note that there are different scenarios where this determination could occur. In the first scenario, a CBP determination could deny preferential treatment. For example, if CBP were to determine that the annual value of parts and materials is less than claimed, or that the net cost of the vehicle is more than claimed, thus bringing the overall high wage manufacturing calculation below the required 25% for a passenger vehicle or 30% for a light truck. In another scenario, a determination by the U.S. Department of Labor could affect the claim of preferential treatment based on labor value content. For example, where the Department of Labor would determine that a high wage facility would be found ineligible due to insufficient wages, thus making those component parts ineligible for consideration for the criteria labor value content, and thus, in some instances, bringing the overall high wage manufacturing calculation below 25% for a passenger vehicle or 30% for a light truck. In addition to these other rules of origin for automotive goods, the USMCA offers alternative staging. The U.S. Trade Representative is developing an alternative staging regime for automobiles that will permit vehicle producers to apply for a longer period of transition for compliance, that is 5 years, versus the 3 years of staging within the standard rules of origin provided in the agreement. For this alternative staging, vehicle producers must submit a petition to the U.S. Trade Representative to request alternative staging no later than July 1st, 2020, the entry into force date of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement. In terms of eligibility, the importer must make a claim for preferential treatment, and the producer must determine that they are unable or unlikely to be able to meet the automotive rules of origin requirements. Companies which are approved in this application will be posted to a public list by the U.S. Trade Representative and adhere to different rules, such as lower thresholds for benefits. Producers can still make claims under the standard staging regime if they determine they no longer require alternative staging. Alternative staging does not replace any other rules of origin provisions of general applicability for these goods to make a claim under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Some relevant resources for your review include the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement Automotive Appendix, which gives greater detail on the alternative staging option, and the U.S. Trade Representative's Federal Register Notice posted on April 21st, 2020 on alternative staging.
Thank you, Adam. This concludes the overview of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Thank you for taking the time to view this video. For additional information on the provisions discussed today, please refer to the USMCA reference guides hosted on the USMCA webpage on cbp.gov. CBP values its relationship with its trade industry partners and appreciates the ability to work closely with and support the trade community on USMCA implementation. Thank you again for your time and work with USMCA.